Howdy, witches. You are once again down with me, Anarchy, coming to you from my new humble abode. You can see back there I've got everything still in box. It's really just boxes of mayhem in here, but that's okay. We're not going to sweat the small stuff. The exciting thing is tonight, I'm going to refer you to the sunlight pouring in through through the window. Clearly not nighttime. Today, or this, let's say this week's episode of Maidens and Magick is going to be a little bit different. As normally I bring you an artist, a musician, or an actress, and then we cross-reference the royal cross-reference her with her work and her life with some form of spirituality, either their own practice or whatever is represented in the film or in the music. This week, I didn't get a chance to do any of that. There was no need for that because this week I am actually bringing you Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. And this is super exciting. I know it's, again, a little bit different, but since we're just coming out of Black History Month and are now in Women's History Month, the month of March still, I figured it was appropriate. And again, what was that thing I kept saying about how this is my show and I'll do whatever the fuck I want anyway? I've always been interested in Marie. I've not known that much about her. So this was great. This gave me an opportunity to do some more robust research, and I really enjoyed it. And some non-Wikipedia driven research, which I know some people are probably wondering about why I use Wikipedia so much. And it's really just the fact that I'm mostly talking to you about stuff that I know, and I'm trying to synthesize this vast amount of information, and I'm really using the Wikipedia tabs as like placeholders to kind of organize my thoughts as I go along. And then every once in a while I discover something new or whatever, because life is about learning. This journey life, it's all about learning. I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you tonight. Again, not nighttime, this week on Maidens and Magick. Without further ado, let's get into the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans, Marie Laveau. Okay, so to begin, going straight to, I'll do a cursory look here at the Wikipedia page. Now you can see here that it gives a definite birthday, which Wikipedia was the only place that took it upon themselves to give her an actual birthday. In fact, if you go to other sources, such as Britannica, the Encyclopedia Britannica, which I find a little bit more credible, there is definitely some discrepancy about when she was actually born. Some indicate that she was born in 1974, and other research indicates or supports 1801 as the year of her birth. What we do know is that her parents were Marguerite Chanel and Charles Laveau. All right, but Marie's history, birth, but let's say her paternity and her ancestry is pretty interesting. And I read a couple things. Here's the funny thing. I was reading it and looking around. Okay, so it was believed that Marie Laveau was born in 1801, but her birth was not recorded. Okay, but this is then the same page here. It says also that where she came from. So, okay, this is where things get interesting, because it will talk about her mother, Marguerite, and Charles Laveau. But it also talks a lot about Catherine, and Catherine would have been her grandmother. And at first, when it was describing it in different pages, it was saying, okay, she was born to Marguerite, but raised by Catherine. Here, it took me, the way they had it worded, I had to keep jumping back and forth. And here's really what we're looking at. Let me just break this down for you. Her grandmother, Catherine, was brought from Africa, or was taken, imprisoned and enslaved, brought from Africa when she was only 7 years old. Okay. She did eventually buy her freedom out of slavery, it says. I saw that somewhere else too. It doesn't really give the details of that. But here's what happened. I have a hard time believing that any sex between Catherine, Catherine and her owner, I have a real hard time believing it was consensual. Granted, you never know, but given the fact that she was a slave and he was a slave owner and she was his property, I'm guessing probably there was some sexual abuse. And he did whatever he wanted with her, as men were wont to do at that time and sometimes still are. But anyway, at any rate, Marguerite was the child of this union between Catherine and the slave owner. Okay, which meant that Marguerite was in the unique position of her father being, well, her paternal father and her owner. He owned her. So, you know, eventually, after the Emancipation Proclamation, Marguerite was freed from her father when she was 18, but then somehow, and I wasn't able to find a lot of detail on this either, that she was forced into an arranged marriage with an older man, a rich white man, but her heart wasn't in it. She believed in true love. She, at some point, again, not exactly clear, records aren't exactly clear. She did meet Charles Laveau, and Charles Laveau, well, is the one who actually she fell in love with, and they had Marie Laveau. However, Marie was not raised by Marguerite. Marguerite had kind of some tumultuous stuff going on, and Marie was instead raised by her grandmother, Catherine, and Catherine seems to have been a very stable, loving grandmother. When Marie Laveau was 8, well, when she turned 18, I don't know, or sometime around her 18th year, she did marry a Haitian immigrant, Jacques Paris. Jacques Paris is maybe the Frenchiest French name I've ever heard in my life. It's a great name, Jacques Paris. And there is some mystery about his disappearance, or about his death. Really, he just kind of disappeared, and nobody really knows. Like, did he go back to Haiti? Eventually, he was presumed dead, and she even began calling herself the Widow Paris, or the what is it, Le Paris, the Widow Paris, I guess it would be. So we don't really know how long they were together and how many children they had together. It's really not. There were some, by some accounts, there were no children. By other accounts, there were children, two daughters. And where did I see that? Well, I saw somewhere that there were the first two daughters. Okay, so nobody really knows, though. There were baptismal records that a Felicity was born. But the other one we're not sure. Well, oh yes, sorry, Marie-Angélie. So there was Marie-Angélie and Felicity. There were some baptismal records, and then kind of nothing else for a while. Interestingly, there was no shortage of well, pregnancies, at least in Marie's life, because when she met her second husband in 1826, this was Louis Christophe Dunsnil de Geff. Oh my God, why is his name so long? Louis Christophe Dunsnil de Galpion. We'll call him Galpion. He was apparently a prominent guy, very wealthy white guy, and they were in a common law marriage for 30 years. In that 30 years, she gave birth to 15 children. 15, apparently. Let's see. She started having babies with Galpion. They had 15 children over the course of 20 years. That's so many babies. That's so many fucking babies. I mean, I guess it's normal at the time, I guess, but they had 7 children that were actually recorded, but 3 of them died in infancy, sorry, and we're not really sure. One of them Marie Philomene Galpion is actually the child that people, who is known kind of unofficially, I guess, as Marie Laveau II, or the second, Marie Laveau the second. I think we could say Marie Laveau II. I'm not sure. I really don't speak French, but I'm guessing. She apparently was the spitting image of her mother when her mother was younger. And so she was believed to be a spirit, a specter. In some cases, some of the ghost stories, they believe that people were actually just seeing not Marie Laveau, but her daughter, Marie Galpion. And interestingly, also, we know this is where a lot of the whole, it's the interesting place where lack of recorded history meets myth, and the twistings of rumors and ghost stories and so forth over the millennia. Definitely, or well, maybe not millennia, but over time, over the decades, let's say, to be more accurate, let's reel it in, Anne, reel it in. But the whole idea that somebody could have a practitioner of voodoo could achieve immortality, for example, or maybe even again with necromancy, maybe resurrect themselves from the grave. So it's just that perfect combination of, again, lack of recorded history and myth moving forward. Let's see. Yeah, apparently there was nobody after Galpion. So I don't know, but 15 children just blows my mind. And the fact that so few of them lived, infant mortality rates being what they were back then, well, that's kind of tragic, even if you don't really like children, I have to say. Pausing there. All right, now that we've learned a little bit about her ancestry and how she came to be in the United States at all, which of course it was slavery. I mean, that's a fucking American history right there for you. It's pretty fucking gross. But now I want to get into her actual life in New Orleans, and who we believe is her daughter, although she might be the granddaughter. I will refer to her as Marie II, because she's known as Marie II. Yes, so please enjoy this little bit of history, and I'll be back at you in a minute. Don't fret. I know this time you're going to go a long time without seeing my beautiful face. God, stop me. All right. So in real life, Marie Laveau lived, let's see, she lived here in this house, which of course is purported to have a lot of residual energy, or to be haunted, for lack of better. I will say that this is not the original structure. I think the original house was torn down in, was it 1902 or something? But this house is still there. It was sold again, I believe, in 2019. So it's under relatively new ownership. I don't know. I know at one time they had tours and stuff there, but I don't know. That was a long time ago. It's probably been years since that's been the case. But of course, there are all kinds of rumors about how she got the house by helping some affluent man free his son from murder charges. And she did some little voodoo, cast a voodoo spell, witched him out of trouble, and he bequeathed her the house. But in reality, they think that her grandmother, Catherine, who raised her, probably was the one who bought the house. At any rate, I wanted to kind of situate it a little bit more, just in case. I feel like most people I know have been to New Orleans at some point, but to give you like an idea of, well, basically, okay, this is the Bywater, which is, this is where my friend Brandon lives, so shout out to her. But hey, but it is becoming a more popular area. I think you can walk right along the water to the French Quarter, which I believe, now somebody's going to call me out on this, but I believe the boundaries of the French Quarter are somewhere, it's about like this. I know it doesn't go as far as here. Yeah, I think this is about it right here. I think that's pretty accurate. If you Google Marie Laveau's house, the first thing that comes up is this house of voodoo, which I will talk about a little bit more in a second, because it has to do more with Marie Dur, or her alleged daughter, or probable daughter, Marie II. It's pretty touristy. It's really like the kind of stuff you would expect from, I don't know if any of this is really, it's cool. It's still history. It's still a nice piece of, nice piece of culture and a nice piece of history that I'm glad is preserved. But as for the legitimacy of any of the voodoo accoutrement that you can purchase there, and I don't know, I can't speak to that, but it's pretty cool looking. It's right on Bourbon Street. So as you can see here, it's in a really densely populated area. If you know Bourbon Street, I mean, it's pretty much in the heart of it. You almost can't miss it. But some other points of interest here in NOLA would be actually Congo Square, which we're going to talk about. And actually, I'll just tell you about it right now. Back in the day when Marie Laveau was still young 20s, I think, when she was just 20s and 30s, she used to practice here. And the deal with Congo Square, it's actually pretty interesting. I myself am not familiar with it, or was not familiar with it prior to doing this research. But I will say, there were apparently, sorry, scrolling around the wrong way because I've got too many pages open. Congo Square became a place where in early years, before slavery was abolished, the slaves were actually allowed one day of rest, right, on Sunday after Mass. So they would go there. This was called, as you can see, Code Noir. Code Noir translates to Black Code, of course, but it was pretty much swampland at the time. And not really anything else there, but they would sell like their little gris-gris. These, I think it's pronounced gris-gris, little charms, and sell. They had cures, potions. You could buy herbs. You could buy. There was a lot of gossip. People would go there to kind of. Some of it, I think, honestly, was more just like therapy. Like, here's some tea. I'll listen to your troubles and give you this tea that, at the very least, will just, it's probably like chamomile or something, Some of it probably was legit. I'm not in any way doubting the legitimacy of this kind of magic as it was practiced at that time. She was known to wear her boa constrictor, who was named Zombie, which again, giving, more, adding to the kind of myth about what people knew about voodoo. And a lot of that had to do with necromancy and zombies, the living dead. Right, and which is still something to this day that's a connection that and that's made often in pop culture anyway. But yeah, there was fortune telling, tarot decks, all kinds of spiritual healing. And as it points out here, the reason why I say I think a lot of it was more like therapy was Marie Laveau was said to be truly compassionate. She would often visit hospitals of the city and help the poor and sick. A lot of these people at the time had yellow fever. And I know later in her life, she also went to visit prisoners some of them maybe were on death row, some of them were in poor health. As she got older, she turned more to Catholicism, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But yeah, this is just another one of those areas of importance or significance in the Laveau history, Congo Square, which I'm sure I've been to Louis Armstrong Park, but Congo Square, I don't know. I'm not getting a mental image of it. Even looking at these pictures, I was kind of like, it doesn't really seem familiar to me, but maybe some of you recognize it. And there's my phone. But that's here, if you can see some of these pictures on. This is all Congo Square. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of New Orleans looks like this. There are lots of squares there. It is right next to Louis Armstrong Square. I think they kind of blended together. So I guess I effectively have seen it, but just wasn't aware of the significance of it. And then, of course, this is her actual house. So not to be confused here with the Voodoo house, much closer to Congo Square. This house here, which is, you know, a small, unassuming house, would be this structure here. Again, I feel like the first time I went to New Orleans back in the 80s, which, like, I know, a million years ago, I feel like I took a tour of that house, or that, but I'm not remembering it well. And I mean, I kind of did eat a lot of acid before we drove there. So anyway, there are some pictures and some context on where we are within New Orleans there. Getting back to her house and what she did in her lifetime. So one of the things she did in her lifetime, yes, was she would go to Congo Square and sell remedies and cures, and probably nobody knows exactly, you know, what kind of spiritual healing or herbology she was into, but she was definitely known to be there. Another thing that I thought was really interesting, because it even makes it all the way to American Horror Story, which I know this is the second time I brought up Coven, but there it is. She is played, Marie Laveau is played by, is it Bassett or Bassett? Angela Bassett or Bassett? I could have looked that up. I am doing a show. But anyway, she is extraordinary in this. And she runs a beauty salon. Interestingly, one of the Laveaux did own a beauty salon. But the thing is, they're not sure if it was Marie Laveau or Marie Dur, the daughter, the second Mary. Here's the thing. When I told you they spotted her daughter out and people thought it was her ghost, and that did happen, but there's another possible explanation, and that would be actually that well, that her daughter actually also was a practitioner of voodoo, and not only a practitioner of voodoo, but really embraced the darker side of it. I said the original Marie turned a little more towards Catholicism at the end. Marie Pure did not. She was like, nope. So there's this other theory that the whole her acting as her mother's specter was intentional, and this was to reinforce because she bore such a striking resemblance, she would even dress up in her mother's old clothing and go out and kind of assume her identity, leading the town to believe that, and it was kind of reinforcing the ideas that Marie de Laveau was such a powerful voodoo priestess that she was beyond aging or death. And that's kind of intense. She, again, so it says here, we don't know really if it was the second Marie Du here, pictured here. I love that I just, I decided I was going to call her that. You got to give me credit, and I'm just sticking with it, right or wrong. She might have been the one who owned the hairdresser, who owned the hair salon. Interestingly, there was a second Marie. So we have Marie Philomene, Philomene, I don't know, who this one would have been the daughter of Jacques Perry, and the other one, Marie Heloise, might have been the daughter of the second man, Galpion, who she was married to, who Marie Laveau was married to for 30 years. Well, common law marriage, because he was a political official and it was scandalous. And I think also there were some issues of biraciality. I guess I don't usually say it like that. But what apparently, biracial couples were not allowed to marry at any rate. So yeah, whoever she was, and then there's always a chance that she might have been a granddaughter, in fact, because we're remembering back, Marie Laveau had 15 children, or at least was pregnant 15 times that were on record, which again is still blowing my mind. But anyway, we don't know. What we do know is that, again, Marie did embrace these darker arts, the darker side of voodoo a little bit more. There are lots of stories about how one becomes a voodoo queen, and was it under the tutelage? I'm an English teacher, I should know these things, of another more famous, or I don't know, when more famous, was she, did she apprentice to somebody, or how did this happen? Nobody's totally sure about that. What they do know is that there was a link. It was not uncommon for voodoo to be practiced simultaneously with Catholicism. They didn't see those two things as being mutually exclusive, or rather, to say it even more clearly, there was a duality there that they just kind of embraced. Now, to me, this is not really at all surprising for a number of reasons. If you look at Catholicism in and of itself, I mean, come on. Right, you're drinking the blood of Christ, eating his body. He's dead, he's resurrected, he can resurrect other people. There's a lot of necromancy there, as I previously discussed in, was that Beetlejuice? Also, what we know about, given what we know about, well, about colonization and what happens with colonization and missionaries. You know, some people who colonized were straight up missionaries, or colonists brought missionaries with them. Also because these people they were fucking slaves, you know, they were trafficked. So when you look up voodoo, it describes it, and this is the Encyclopedia Britannica, so it's, you know, I mean, I guess this quasi-official definition of what voodoo is. It describes it straight up as a Haitian religion. And we know that Catherine was taken from Haiti. So, but here's the thing. We look at all the different ways that it's spelled, an Afro-Haitian religion. Here's the thing. And the colonists almost assuredly were all Roman Catholic. And so as things happen, you know, like with Christianity, you take the pre-existing, pre-Christian goddess worshiping religions, or earth worshiping religions, and you switch a couple of dates, and you borrow the Christmas tree and other sorts of symbols, and, you know, from that religion and practices, and I don't know, you know, practices, ceremonies, and you alter a few things. Appropriation happens. It eventually, people forget the point of origin. The things become so amalgamated. So I find this very fascinating that when you look up voodoo, it immediately points you to Haiti. Now, I'm going to do something that I'm completely not trying to insult anybody here, but the thing about Haiti, and I have had students, and actually one of my coworkers is Haitian. It's just one of those places where people kind of avoid. If you look at it, I mean, look all around it. People fucking vacation in the Cayman Islands and the Bahamas and Jamaica, and they'll go to Puerto Rico, they'll go to the Virgin Islands. But man, people just skip right the fuck over the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It's just like, it's this huge island, much bigger than any of the other places to which people go to vacation. But, you know, people just don't really... I don't know, I just wanted to make sure its location was well known. And also, which you could see quite clearly, when I looked up voodoo in general, like, what was the other one? I looked at, here were also some sights and sounds of, not sounds, not unless you got a really good imagination. I wanted to show you some more of Bourbon Street. This is in and around the area where Marie Laveau's, well, the voodoo shop can be found. New Orleans is pretty fucking cool. But anyway, when you look up voodoo, the first thing that comes up on Wikipedia is Louisiana voodoo. And that's because it had so much to do with the African diaspora. And which is kind of a gentle way to put it, considering, again, these people were trafficked by us. So, okay, so meaning that a lot of it came from Africa. A lot of the Louisiana voodoo came from Africa. So when I was like, well, where in Africa, West Africa? Okay, this place I've never heard of before. So I looked it up. Oops, I think I just closed that out. So I looked it up and it's here, like truly West Africa. I'm not exactly sure the boundaries of it, and I'm sure that it was contested. I think it's at least this region here, which if we look back here, that would be probably, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe Nigeria, maybe Niger, maybe Mali, maybe, I'm not exactly sure, but somewhere in this area. So coastal, probably West Africa. If you can see, you can imagine the slave trade route that they would almost necessarily pass right by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Some of those slaves maybe got lucky and, were able to escape. I like to imagine, I don't know, and live a nice life somewhere on the fucking in Jamaica or the Cayman Islands. But the reality of it is most of them ended up porting in Miami at first. And then, once people were like, everybody's, Miami was recognized as a major port. I think some of them probably went through the Gulf to, when if they couldn't, for whatever reason, get through Miami, a lot of them started going to, or probably went to, this is my guess, to Galveston. Galveston is also a major port city, and we know that a lot of slaves ended up in this area through there and through, unfortunately, through all of Louisiana and into Florida, all through this region. This is anywhere in here. Of course, some of them probably ported on the other side, but I don't know. A lot of that is just conjecture and shitty, but anyway, that gives it context within a larger geographical picture. But going back here to New Orleans really is fantastic. That is not where I meant to go. Going back to the Louisiana voodoo and the religion, or the history of that, the transmission of that. It's really hard to say that, like, I think a lot of it was, a lot of it is, says here, is the cultural practices are interlinked, and a lot of it's really rooted in ancestor worship, which is interesting because ancestor worship is definitely an Eastern, Middle East, and a Far East thing. It's somehow at some point in the West, we stopped. I don't know. People just didn't give ancestor worship enough. It just didn't really take root. And then you get to America, and what we're known for, like disposing of our old people like trash. So it's really kind of sad. I was looking a little more at Haiti, since that is where Caroline, or nope, what was her mother's name? Her grandmother's name, Catherine. Sorry, that's where she was taken from. And man, Haiti just has the craziest. The history of Haiti is just insane. It was colonized so many fucking times. I didn't even really realize, and I've read most of this, but honestly, it was under Spanish rule. It was under French rule. Then there was the Haitian Revolution that happened, but that was not the final, unfortunately, it didn't really stick, because while Haiti did become independent, technically it became independent, it was still the ownership or the conquest of it was still hotly contested. In fact, Spanish people said but they still owned part of it. French people were like, no, we still own part of it. And the Haitian people are like, fuck you, we're independent now. And then guess who eventually steps in? I mean, eventually the United States comes in. I did not mean to click on that, but that's a gruesome fucking picture. Wow. That's intense. And I don't know, I don't know how I got here, but let's look at these pictures. Wow. All right. So yeah, you know, I feel like I could read about Haiti a lot more, but I can say that it just, when people are so war torn like this, you always kind of wonder why, and it usually has to do with the fact that it's a advantageous point, strategically speaking, from a military perspective, much like Okinawa in Japan. And it breaks my heart because I've seen that kind of life firsthand, and I know that when the best job you can get is on the American military base, your life is hard. Your life is really hard. So my politics notwithstanding, getting back to actual voodoo, yeah, the origins of voodoo seem to be definitely African, West African, transmitted by the slave trade, or by the human trafficking to Haiti and around to this area, the Dominican Republic, and then of course via the slaves into our southern states of North America. And not so, though certainly not confined to the southern states of America, definitely where they took root at first. Other than that, I did want to say, not to go too far down the road of American Horror Story again, but I do really like this is not historically accurate, of course, but there are some parts of it that I'm surprised. Like, you know, they really kept a lot of the rituals that she performs in the series are straight from the playbook. I mean, it's very, there wasn't a lot of embellishing. They really did some amount of homework. And again, even situating her in a hair salon. I did see this thing here, fascinating facts you didn't know about voodoo. And what was really interesting here is, you know, a lot of us think about voodoo and we think about the like little voodoo dolls, of course, right? The pins, sticking pins into a doll to cause somebody physical ailments and suffering. Sure, there might have been some of that, but there was also a lot of animism and spiritism, which I find very interesting. So this is actually, you can see it going back to the earth, you know, the more earth-centric, the Gaiist kind of earth worshiping cultures where, yes, this tree is sentient, it has a life, it has a will to live, it has all of the things that we have, it's endowed with the ability to emote and to feel and all of these. I fucking love that. I love animism within nature, and that trees and things could be deities, goddesses, and that to me is just such a beautiful thing, a beautiful spiritual practice. The believing that it's rooted, voodoo is believes in two interrelated worlds also fascinates me, because this ties into shamanism, which is another thing that I really want to talk about, that the veils between the living and the dead are very thin and can be traversed and negotiated and manipulated. And this gets very fucking interesting, which is probably also how necromancy comes into it. And it takes a darker turn towards the zombie, you know, rhetoric and all that. I'm not into zombies. I'm not fucking sorry. I'm not into zombies. The communicating with spirits, that one spans a lot of practices, so that doesn't surprise me. And here, actually reaching an even larger audience, not just West Africa and Haiti and Louisiana, but also Cuba, Brazil, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, which I just said, which again totally makes sense with the trafficking route. I have to say though, I don't know. I mean, I wonder about Cuba a lot. It makes sense. But that Cuba surprised me a little bit more than the other places for some reason. I don't know. I've known a few Cuban people in my life, and the ones that I have known have seemed really anti-spiritual. But who knows? That could I'm sure is just my experience. Also, what's really interesting is voodooism had a lot to do with the Haitian Revolution. Not a lot, but tangentially so. That when people are colonized again and again and again, they cleave even tighter to their practices, their traditions, their long-standing traditions and customs, beliefs and spirituality and practices that, you've taken our resources, you've taken our land, but fuck you, you're not taking our gods, and that's a very interesting thing that I think that with the Haitian Revolution, I think there was a renewed interest in voodooism or the practice of it. A little bit of speculation there on my part, of course, I'm just talking. There were some attempts to ban it, which happens with everything. Let's see. And urban legend here. I don't know if any of you have called or have heard of hoodoo. The myth of the voodoo doll was a tool to bestow a curse is something that has been propagated by popular culture and Hollywood in particular. So while some voodoo practitioners might have used some tools, similar to dolls, I do want to, let's point out that not everything you see in the movies is true. I know it's a shock. It's a fucking shock. Yeah. And then I don't know. That was pretty much it for our trip with voodoo, talking about, of course, Marie Laveau being brought, her grandmother, Catherine, being brought here as a slave from Haiti, being probably raped by her owner, giving birth to her mother, Marguerite, who ran off with another politician or something. And there was some kind of scandal that forced her to leave Marie with her grandmother to be raised in this house here, and which, by the way, please note the the name of the website here. But I do think a lot of information in here is good and seems corroborated by other sites. Then the mystery of, was it Marie Du that people saw in the beauty parlor? Definitely. The first Marie was in Côte at Congo Square, and did perform lots of spiritualism. I will say at the end, when Marie got very sick, she rarely left the house. And I told you again, she turned toward Catholicism at the end a lot. She just kind of, I won't say that she abandoned voodoo, but towards the end of her life, she really focused on her Catholic faith. She attended Mass daily. She worked with death row prisoners, helping them to repent before they were sent to hang from the gallows. All in all, she really seems like an altruistic person, a good Samaritan, who just, genuinely was trying to help people. Marie Du, I don't know, maybe a little bit darker. I like the idea of them, the myth of them, tricking each other and kind of leading people to believe that Marie was forever youthful and defying death, maybe had such intense powers as a high priestess that she was able to kind of thumb her nose at death and all of that stuff. There are tons of sightings, haunted tombs, tons of places where you can go that are purportedly haunted. But as far as we know, she died peacefully as could be. And I think she was in her 80s. I believe I read that she was in her 80s. So she led a pretty long life, especially for one as, the product of a rape slave, or a slave raping, or slave raping. I will say this. I do like that that Marie Du was rumored to embrace the darker side of voodoo. extremely wild rituals, particularly on St. John's Eve, which might be a little bit of blasphemy, because St. John's Eve, and here's where I'm going to end, St. John's Eve was the night before St. John the Baptist's birthday, so St. John's Day. It says, and I didn't know this either. Of course, I'm familiar with this from studying Christianity, religion in general, world religion. That's my background. But that it's the most important date for voodoo practitioners. Again, we can see the perfect marriage right there between an indigenous spiritual practice and the colonization of motherfucking white men and their fucking goddamn stupid Christianity. It pisses me off. They're so fucking morally superior. But yeah, it actually seems very pagan too. The whole thing was bonfires, dancing, kind of a lot of things that used to be associated with, say, May Day, or here's something else. June 23rd, you might notice, I thought I had this pulled up somewhere. June 23rd, as you might notice, is also what? Summer solstice, you guys. It's solstice. It's also midsummer. It is distinctly pagan, ripped off by these bastard Christians, and somehow became married, not somehow, and became married with the indigenous African spiritual practices because the white men fucking wanted slaves. It's a sick, twisted history. But that's what it was. All right, before I give myself a heart attack talking about the white men in power and the fucking goddamn Christians, the hypocrisy and the moral righteousness, yeah, I will say, interestingly, it's a holiday celebrated in many places, and I couldn't find out, well, to be honest, I didn't really look that hard. If it's still something that's practiced in Louisiana, I would love to see. It does. Oh, it does. It does say right. I thought I had seen it. Look at how closely my attention to detail. The celebration still continues today, and it can be found alongside Bayou Street John at the Magnolia Bridge across from Cabrini High School on Moss. That is very fucking specific. So if you're in New Orleans, or the next time you're in New Orleans around summer solstice, I would check that out. I know I will. At some point, I will. All right. So right there. Okay. And so in conclusion, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed learning about her and her life and voodoo in general. I did at some point in there towards the beginning say something about circling back to the House of Voodoo, and then I just didn't do it. Hey guys, give me a fucking break, man. This is not scripted. You people nah, I'm joking. I love you all. But here, where am I going? So Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo, it's specious. I'm not, specious is a good word. They claim on their website to be the home of Marie Dur. I really don't know the former home. So I don't really know how credible this is or not. They are the only people saying that, making this claim, in other words, because we're not even sure, 100% sure that it is Marie Laveau's daughter. It could be her granddaughter. We don't know if it's from the union between Jacques Perret or the second guy whose name I'm forgetting right now. Anyway, but that's their story. I thought I'd point it out. I'm not really going to say anything else about it. In fact, I'm not going to say anything else about anything except, you guys, you've been down with me, Anarchy. Please, please, stay witchy.